Hey, welcome back everybody. Once again, it's Matthew, Watty's channel. As we continue on, today's video is the conclusion of round 3 of the AWA Remco tournament. So, as you know, just last 20 figures, so 10 matches. Round 3 is only going to consist of the 2 videos, and then, of course, as we push into round 4, we're going to end up with 5 winners. So, kind of looking ahead into round 5, do I want to look at the 5 figures as kind of like your semifinals? You know, have a one-on-one matchup, and then whichever 3 figures left over have a one-on-one and push those 2 figures into the finals? Or do I want to have another 3-man finals, which in that case I'm probably going to have to pull another figure to battle so that there's 3 even matches. Now, there are a few figures I purchased recently. There's really only one figure I want to include in this tournament. That is Manager Precious. As I've said before, I didn't include that figure. I didn't have a loose Precious figure, but I did win one on auction. Now, I could pay for that figure immediately. I do have a few other figures I'm bidding on, so I'm kind of waiting on getting all those figures bundled together and then just kind of include that figure in the tournament. Now, adding a figure for the first time in round 5, to me it doesn't really matter, because all it does is balance out the matches. I know Precious would never in a million years win a battle, so it's just for even numbers sake. But or what I could just simply do is have your one-on-one and then just pick 2 out of the last 3 figures to win, and then have a 3-man matchup finals, which is actually what I prefer. I kind of look at it as like Survivor, you know, the first 18, 19 seasons, you had like two members vying for the $1 million, prize money, and then they finally upped it to 3 members who could, give their last remarks to say why they deserve to win. So I kind of like the 3-man matchup better myself, but just kind of talking about it, I think that's what I want to do, so I don't have to really include another member. If I get the figure in time, sure, I'll do it, but it doesn't have to happen. So, anyways, today's matchup, or this video's matchups, there's about 3 matchups here in particular, which I absolutely love, both figures, and I don't want to lose any one of them. Those are the type of figures, I want to say, okay, let's get them to the bottom 5, the bottom 5, and I can't do it, and it sucks. This is going to be a really tough call on quite a few of these figures. But the first matchup we are looking at is going to feature the Barbarian as he squares off against Dingo Warrior. And I've kind of said it before. I felt like the Dingo Warrior is one of those figures that could very easily win this entire tournament, hands down, with very little effort. The figure is just that awesome. So, Jim Hellwig, a lot of people know the story about the Ultimate Warrior and, his different gimmicks over the years. So, as far as him being a professional wrestler, that he wasn't. He was just basically this big buff bodybuilder type, and one of his partners, who we would know later on as Sting, again, another bodybuilder. They went into AWA, and they formed Blade Runners. Very little skill set, didn't grow up or didn't train as wrestlers, basically hired on because of their physique. And we all know about, Vince McMahon's obsession with bodybuilders, and that's why later on, in the late 80s, he brought him to WWF. But before then, he was a Blade Runner. He went to AWA, and he decided he wanted to be a singles wrestler, became the Dingo Warrior, and was actually a heavyweight champion, I believe in the Texas territories or something like that. And in 1987, brought into WWF. One of those characters who got an immediate push. And I keep getting these little pop-ups on my screen. It's driving me nuts. So, 2-time Intercontinental Champion. Actually, the Ultimate Warrior. They dropped the whole Dingo gimmick, gave him the Ultimate Warrior, which is obviously... that right there was would have probably increased his. I'm trying to say it the right way. Would have probably gave his namesake a whole lot more effect. And sorry, I had to pause the video for a little bit. Keep getting these little stupid pop-up screens on the bottom telling me to connect to Wi-Fi. I'm like, dude, I don't need to connect to Wi-Fi. And it's very distracting, and it keeps messing me up. And I don't remember where I even left off. Oh, right. Ultimate Warrior, which dropping the dingo, which was, I think, imperative because you gave this much more ferocious name in the Ultimate Warrior. So that just sounds so much better. Dingo. Whatever. Anyways, two-time Intercontinental Champion, WWF, and of course, first man ever to hold both Intercontinental and Heavyweight title at the same time. Absolutely amazing. And I think Jim Hellwig once made a comment about how his, I believe it was WrestleMania 6, I want to say. So WrestleMania 5 was Hogan and Savage. So, yeah, it had to be WrestleMania 6 with Warrior and Hogan. How he said that, his matchup with Hulk Hogan was the greatest match of his career. And then later on, his matchup with Hulk Hogan was the worst match of his career. Talking about your, I believe it was in 1996, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. Halloween Havoc, WCW, The Warrior, they dropped the Ultimate from the name tag, squares off against Hollywood Hogan. And, I only saw small clips of it, little previews, not like a full match or anything, like a little picture show and whatnot. But to me, that looked like it would have been a fun match or whatnot. But it's been deemed as one of the worst matches ever created. And again, he went from his WWF Ultimate WrestleMania days to this WCW Halloween Havoc deal, both featuring Hogan, both featuring his best and worst match ever. Left WWF under negative circumstances. It seems like every time. I think he first left around 1992, so he wrestled for WWF from 87 to 92, and I think around 93 or so he was booted because steroid use. He was also booted because he had like a pay dispute with Vince McMahon, WWF. Went to WCW, just like a number of other characters who've gone from WWF, had pretty successful careers, ended up in WCW, and were basically relegated to mop-up duty, essentially. The Warrior being one of them. Guys like Marty Jannetty. Barry Horowitz was like another one of those guys that they wanted to be like a big name acquisition, but if they just played him as his role as a jobber type, I think he would have been just fine. But they wanted to make him a superstar, which he never really was. Brutus Beefcake being another one of those guys. I don't think 1-2-3 Kid really had a successful career even with the NWO as he had with the WWF. So a lot of these guys that were basically over. I don't know if Ultimate Warrior could have ever been over, but because of his antics in the locker room and not being a real worker, obviously hurt his criteria with WCW. And then we have the Barbarian. Every time I hear the name Barbarian, all I think about is Powers of Pain, WWF with Warlord. And so, even though I know this isn't the same person, even myself might get confused from time to time. So, John Nord portrayed the Barbarian in AWA, of course. And as a matter of fact, he actually tag teamed with Bruiser Brody. And that's important because in the early 90s, when John Nord went to WWF, he became this Nord, what do you call it? I forget what it was called, but he became the Berserker. And I think he was originally called the Viking, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm trying to think. I think it was Jimmy. No, it wasn't Jimmy Hart. It was Mr. Fuji. Mr. Fuji managed him, and he kind of had like this gimmick, kind of portraying, Bruiser Brody. Obviously, Bruiser Brody had just been killed in Puerto Rico not too long prior, so he was kind of giving a shout out of sorts, portraying the Bruiser Brody character, much more dialed down in the WWF, of course. Huffing and puffing, throwing his guys out of the ring to be counted out for his victories. He was in there and he had his little, he was winner of like battle royals. He participated in other Royal Rumbles. I remember him getting tossed out by Hulk Hogan. That was pretty awesome. what I find interesting is he had this feud with Jimmy Snuka on the WWF, which was so awesome because he and Bruiser Brody actually had a tag team match and kind of feuded with guys like Jimmy Snuka, and I'm trying to think who Jimmy Snuka's tag team partner was. Off the top of my head, I'd be embarrassed. I can't remember it, but you know, Jimmy Snuka, obviously in AWA and WWF, I thought was pretty awesome. And Undertaker, I mean, that's infamous. Him trying to run Undertaker through with his sword. And of course, you know, right there, you know, feuding with, you know, Bret Hart. Makes sense. You know, you want that title. You want to be the best. You got to beat the best. The two figures themselves, from the get-go, either one of these two figures have a legitimate chance of winning the entire tournament. You know, I could have just simply done like, you know what, here's Ultimate Warrior or Dingo Warrior. This is the first figure. Hold up another figure. Do a matchup. Whoever wins, face the next guy. Second guy, third guy, fourth. This could have been my first figure selected, and I could have gone through every single figure and had a matchup against this one, and this one could win the whole tournament. But I decided to do it this way, the whole elimination, you know, round style tournament. And it sucks because I don't want to see either one. Even if these guys weren't to win this tournament, I'd want to see them in like the semifinals at least. You know, last four, last five guys standing. This is a tough call, man. One of the best face paints. Everything else detailed throughout the whole figure. The Ultimate Warrior shirt. Everything is just incredible. But the Barbarian, even as a custom figure, that head mold looks 100% to the original. And even though the accessories are a different shade of color than what the Barbarian figure you'd find in the Matt Mania Series 5 figures, you know, Chad, he put his own little fresh take on the figure, and I kind of respect it in both ways. One, because it looks like the figure, the original guy, and he gave his own perspective. So with the added accessories, the look of the figure, even though it's a custom, I consider it to be part of the original line, just for, you know, display sake and all that. By likability, who I grew up more enjoying, Ultimate Warrior should have the hands down at the top of this list, but I'm going to give it to the Barbarian. I just think that the John Nord figure, like I said, any of your Matt Mania figures should have the top priority of winning this tournament. It doesn't mean that they will, but this one is just too good to pass up on. So sadly, here in round 3, I lose the first of the two Warrior figures. Alright, coming up next, and this one are two beloved characters, and man, if this stupid note doesn't keep popping up. So either way, no matter which decision I make, I feel like I'm going to offend somebody because these are two beloved characters. Two beloved bad guys. You know, bad guy number 1, I kind of look at him as a better bad guy than good guy, but it's going to feature Macho Man as he squares off against Honky Tonk Man. So I talked about liking the head mold of the other Macho Man custom a little bit better, but just a little bit more design, a little bit more going on with this particular figure. Again, I think Macho Man really solidified the Worker title when he made when he won the Intercontinental Championship. Very few wrestlers can match up to what the Macho Man has accomplished, both as Intercontinental Champion and Heavyweight Champion. Legitimate face of a franchise. I mean, the man's successful wherever he went. I mean, he's huge megastar in WWF, and being brought over to WCW. I mean, even watching like Hogan turn on him and whatnot, kind of sad. But you know, Hogan and Macho Man already had that feud, kind of like that love-hate relationship back in WWF, so it only made sense. Sadly enough, for whatever reason, Macho Man doesn't always get the best figures. His LJN figure is okay. I don't like the hands up pose. His original San Francisco Toymaker figures are quite possibly the worst figures ever created. I mean, they're very reminiscent to the LJN Rick Rude. You know, his hands or arms are just basically pinned to the side. Terrible figure. His Hasbro figures are amazing. He's got 4 different figures, technically 3 because Series 2 and Series 3 are basically the exact same figure with just the different writing on the trunks. A man I feel like could have had a legitimate Remco figure if he was in AWA during that time period. And I think what Russ did with this figure was amazing. And overall quality figure. Does he win this tournament? I don't know if he's my favorite to win the tournament. He's still a legitimate contender to make it down to the semifinals. Problem is, I've talked about the Honky Tonk Man, which I can't remember 100%, but I think this was the very first custom I ever bought from Russ. Maybe. I know I bought from him before I ever got started buying up the custom Remcos. So I'm trying to think what else I've gotten from him in the past. Maybe it was Remco figures, but maybe it was like originals or something. But anyways, you got your Honky Tonk Man in fighting gear. You look at LJN, fully clothed. You look at the Hasbro, fully clothed. And then you get this, Remco era amazing figure. Swapped out the body, or swapped out the head. Gave him just a pristine 3D printed Honky Tonk Man look. Awesome color to the pants. And you finally got an in-ring fighter in the Honky Tonk Man. So, I think it was a Jimmy Hart managed man. Again, he when he joined forces with Greg Valentine in the early 90s to form Rhythm and Blues. Still disappointed that they never did come out with that Rhythm and Blues Greg Valentine. I mean, I acquired one about a year and a half ago as a custom. And it was actually in the original Series 5 Greg Valentine, or is it? No, take it back. Series 3 Greg Valentine package from Hasbro. So, of course, now Mattel Retros, they have their own version, but I still like the custom version I had prior to that. Honky Tonk Man, I mean, I don't ever remember Honky Tonk Man being a good guy. There are very few wrestlers that, over the course of their careers, they didn't transition bad or good. Like Ricky Steamboat, I think was always a good guy. And I think he's one of very few guys that were ever strictly good throughout their whole career. Honky Tonk Man, I'm not sure. I don't ever remember hearing about him ever being a good guy. And guys like Ted DiBiase and Honky Tonk Man, to me, they're just some of your more notable good guys, or bad guys, and they were fantastic bad guys. They were just, even if they weren't Honky Tonk Man, I don't remember him being the most, fantastic in-ring fighter, but he was, he was someone I watched and I enjoyed, rooting against. Just the guys that kind of played their roles, and they played their roles to perfection. And I've mentioned it 1,000 times, your longest tenured Intercontinental Champion. It would have been nice. I think it was in round 2 when I think it was Dingo Warrior defeated the clothed or the suited Honky Tonk Man to advance to round 3. It would have been nice if the other Warrior faced this Honky Tonk Man here and had the kind of a rematch. It would have been fitting, but I just missed him by about 1 match here. A really tough call, guys. Again, based on heart, tells me Macho Man is my selection. And I'm pretty sure most people would probably root for Macho Man in this matchup. I just can't do it. I have to go with the Honky Tonk Man. I mean, I don't know if he's going to make it to the semifinals. Does he make it out of round 4? It would be surprising, but he is legitimately one of my favorite pieces, regardless of whether or not I choose him over any of the other guys. And I'm excited to have him. So far, Honky Tonk Man joins the Barbarian in this video for moving on to round 4. The next matchup is another painful one because I am going to lose one of my favorite figures. Even though, again, this first custom is just that. It's a custom, but I put it on the shelf with my original figures because it's, pretty much identical to the original figure anyways. They did a really solid job with it. And I'm probably never going to get original figures of guys like Barbarian and the Sheik and the Russian and whatnot. So, you got to pick up the customs, because you're paying anywhere between $50 to $100 for the custom, as opposed to paying like $1,000 to $1,500 for an original. So, and it's going to feature the Russian Boris Zukov as he squares off against Jerry the King Lawler. What I think I love about the Lawler figure in particular, yeah, with the whole look, that is Jerry Lawler's look, which is awesome. He probably has what I think is the best looking accessory for a Remco I've ever seen. I mean, the crown is just absolutely amazing. And you didn't have to do any major changes to the head mold. Take an existing figure, give it a little paint job, bam. To me, that looks like a young Jerry Lawler based on your 1980s technology. Obviously, you can't look at this and then look at one of the more modern figures like, Jack Specific or Mattel or something like that and be like, yeah, well, this looks nothing like Jerry. Based on what they had during the Remco era, that's perfect. And of course, it's the accessories and it's the outfit that really, dictate who that wrestler is. And this is an incredible piece. Obviously, when I started watching wrestling and I saw the introduction of Jerry Lawler to WWF, he was mostly a commentator. He had his feuds here and there, but it kind of feels like if you guys ever watched the TV show Oz, there was a character, O'Reilly. Whenever he got into these little tiffs with other inmates, he would go to another inmate and try to make them believe that his enemies are their enemies, so they would get their hands dirty and take care of the other inmate, essentially. And I kind of feel like that's what Jerry Lawler did. He'd have these feuds, but he would never actually participate in the matches. Most of the time, he would get someone else to do the dirty work, essentially. And again, when I talk about commentators, Jerry Lawler and Vince McMahon are probably my two favorite commentators of all time. Followed by like Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. Those four for me, those are four commentators of childhood. Those are the four premier guys. Yeah, I could go back and watch tapes of like, Jesse Ventura and whatnot. And who was that guy from England? He's like in all these videos and all these old matches and stuff. Somebody's going to say the name in the comments, and I'm going to feel ashamed that I can't remember it. But, they're pretty frequent too. But Jerry Lawler, amazing. Boris Zukov, as I've said before. Whether it's the original figure you're looking at, the custom, easily one of the simple greatest figures, especially among the Matt Mania Series 5 figures. I mean, this could be a semifinalist right here, easily. It's got this awesome look, accessories. The head mold is one of the most pristine designs I've seen among any figures. Russ definitely went all out on this figure. I absolutely love this one. So a lot of the times I'll talk about characters and I'll give like this full description of their lives or back history or something. And for whatever reason, like I forget, that information. Like I'll start talking about somebody else and all of a sudden everything I've known about other characters kind of like just disappear. When I was doing the AWA Remco review and I was looking at all the Series 5 Matt Mania figures, I gave a full description of Boris Zukov, but for whatever reason, I can't really remember anything about him. What I do remember, if you hear him talk, doing like interviews or whatnot, he sounds just like he's really from Russia, You would never suspect that he's actually born in Minnesota. I'm like, that's insane. He does such a fantastic accent. And, there are a bunch of different Russian tag team partners over the years, which include Nikolai Volkov in the 90s, but they really didn't do much as a tag team. And after the Gulf War, Nikolai Volkov became a good guy and then went back to being a bad guy, working for Ted DiBiase. And Boris Zukov was essentially nothing more but relegated to mop-up duty as like a jobber type. And I think he spent like maybe a year or less in WWF, so not really a successful career there. But highly successful wrestler throughout territories, AWA, etc. In this particular case, I have to go with Boris Zukov. Obviously, I've known a whole lot more about Jerry Lawler and appreciated him over the years, even though he sometimes made like this kind of like a coward type. This is such a fantastic figure. Does he make it to round 5, the semifinals? I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how far this guy can go because, again, he's just one of my favorite pieces to talk about. So, Boris Zukov is in round 4, which takes us to our next matchup. And, guys, this is another one of those matches I don't want to think about because I don't know who to choose. And we'll start with the Iron Sheik. Iron Sheik lived a nice full life. You know, he was, I believe, 80 or 81 years old, something like that. He did die very recently. And and I said it before, and I'll probably always mention it, whenever somebody dies, it doesn't matter if you know who they are or not. You know, it sucks to hear of somebody's death. You know, it is life, but you never want to hear anyone die. I don't care if they're 20 years old or 120 years old. A death is a death. It's going to affect somebody. And in the wrestling world, a lot of people grew up watching the Iron Sheik. And Colonel Mustafa in the 90s, as I always called him Iron Sheik whenever I talk about, you know, Sergeant Slaughter and General Adnan. But Colonel Mustafa is what I should have been calling him. But I know him as Iron Sheik, so I'll always call him the Iron Sheik. You know, I know Jim Brunzell as Killer Bees. So when I think of Jim Brunzell, I'm not going to think high flyers. I'm going to think Killer Bees, you know. It's just kind of like what you grow up with, you know, the era and whatnot. Jim Brunzell, I never really knew his name until I started collecting the LJN figures and, you know, got the Killer Bee tag team and whatnot. But I always knew of the Killer Bees tag team. You know, it's like, I don't know, Demolition or Legion of Doom. You know their gimmicks. You know Hawk and Animal. You know Axe and Smash, right? But you really don't know their personal names. Doesn't mean that the Killer Bees themselves didn't mean something. You know, I watched them a little bit from childhood. But Iron Sheik, like I said, he's one of the biggest superstars of the 80s. And this man wasn't just a megastar in WWF. He was a megastar regardless of wherever he went. And AWA, I think if he were still present in AWA during the time the Rumpos came out, most definitely would have gotten a figure. Problem is, a lot of the AWA Remco figures were 2-packs. So would he have had a match with an opponent in the first couple of series? I don't know. I mean, I really can't think of anyone that he may have had a massive feud with in AWA days. So, but I think if he had a release in Series 5, this is exactly what he would have looked like, or very close to it. And absolutely incredible piece. And I'm trying to think if I want this same figure, but with LJN style, you know, clothing. I actually like this a lot better than the LJN color scheme, but Jim Brunzell. I've talked about this figure being one of my absolute favorite Remco original figures. And it starts with the awesome accessory. And, of course, the tie-dye trunks with him and Greg Gagne are awesome. You know, Greg Gagne is more like yellow, where these are more like white. And you can find pictures with him in his exact look. And I'm trying to look at my LJN Customs, and neither one of them in this particular scheme. That's okay. It's a fantastic piece. I kind of feel like I'm going to choose the Iron Sheik in this matchup. And if I do that, it's going to hurt a lot because, like I said, the High Flyers, either one, Jim Brunzell or Greg Gagne, have a couple of the best original figures on the line. And not seeing this figure make it to the semifinals after just recently my tag team tournament, watching having one tag team from each line, a tag team from Galoob, a tag team from Remco, from Hasbro, from LJN, all make it to the semifinals. I would love for this figure to be a semifinalist. Even if he doesn't win the tournament, just making it to the last four, last five guys in that last video, or round 5 would be amazing. I just can't do it. I can't put him over the Iron Sheik. I thought I might have an idea that I would choose the Sheik when I first saw the drawing, but again, you never really know until you start talking about the figures. And love the figure, but to me, I just kind of feel like Iron Sheik has been there from childhood. I've known him longer from childhood. And when I do the next video, I think I'm going to want to talk a little bit more about his career. But it's just too awesome of a piece. The last matchup, and I can never keep this freaking scarf on. It's driving me nuts. Let me try to put this back on together. So, another custom, yes. But, like Barbarian and like Boris Zukov, I consider it to be an original because it very closely resembles the original Al-Kassi character, Sheik Al-Kassi. You know, I'm going to keep that off because I can't keep it on. So there's another Al-Kassi custom I saw, and the head mold is completely different. So I have to actually go back at some point and actually look at the original Al-Kassi figure and see if that's more reminiscent to the original. Because if it is, again, it's going to stick with the original. He squares off against Sheep Herder Luke. I wasn't able to push forward Butch in the last round, but at least one of the Sheep Herders made it forward to round 3, which is awesome. And I've already said before, you know, the Sheep Herders, they've got all these different names. I mean, they were actually more successful than I ever gave them credit for. And one of the things I mentioned is the different name tags that they've had, like the Kiwis or the New Zealand Kiwis, the Sheep Herders, New Zealand Sheep Herders, moving on to Bushwhackers in the 90s with the WWF, or late 80s. I'm trying to think when they came in. I think 89 or 90, but I could be wrong. But it wasn't always Luke and Butch, as you guys know. They actually had a couple other guys part of their tag team over the years. But 36 years as wrestlers. I mean, the toll that takes on your body. If you told me that they started wrestling in the early 80s, I would have been like, okay, makes sense. But finding out that they've been like professional athletes, professional wrestlers since the 1960s was crazy. So, UWF, it was absorbed by AWA, of course, or NWA, excuse me. And I mentioned that the Sheep Herders were the last tag team champions that UWF had. And to me, I kind of look at the dial-down Bushwhackers of the 90s, and I would never look at them as a legitimate superpower tag team or anything like that. Not even a tag team that would, like, win the titles on, like, Monday Night Raw and then probably lose them the next day on, like, what's it called, Tuesday Titans or something? I don't know if those two shows went back-to-back or anything. I'm just kind of throwing out names just for the sake of argument here. And they were champions for, like, one day. The fact that you could sit back and say, yeah, they were tag team champions, or this guy was a heavyweight. Whether they were champion for 1 minute or 10 years, just to say that you were a champion at some point was incredible. That's why I think it's really important for guys like Marty Jannetty, who was not one of the most successful Intercontinental champions, but just to say that he was a champion, you know, that means something. The Sheik Al-Kassi, again, Matt Mania, Series 5, 1986, one of the best looking figures, as you know, one of the best accessories. I don't know a whole lot about him from his AWA days or other territories, stuff like that. Obviously, my mind always goes to General Adnan of the 1990s, because what have I talked about in the past? The Saddam Hussein appearance. So, obviously, with America fighting Iraq, it only makes sense. And then you have Colonel Mustafa as tag team partners with what turncoat Sergeant Slaughter. You know, General Anand was in the corner. And The man played his role. That is so awesome. And you're just another one of those guys who were just adept at making, saying the right thing or just portraying a character the right way. And there was like this, what was it? It wasn't Survivor Series, but it was like a 6-man tag team match or 10-man tag team match. I don't remember. But it featured like Jim Duggan on one side. Sergeant Slaughter was a good guy again, and he was over there. And you had General Don on the bad side, and he was one of the first guys eliminated. And you saw him in the ring. It's like nothing special. Basically, beat up like a jobber, pinned, bam, he's out of the match. This, you would think that this might potentially be an easy decision, but it's really not. I know a lot more about the Bushwhackers, or I've watched them a whole lot more than I ever did with the Sheik or the General Non characters. I really love the military look. I will always gravitate a lot towards the military look, so this would be a legitimate chance of moving forward to round 4. It's not going to happen, and I think you guys know that this is the right decision to go with the Sheik. And even though the Barbarian, the Sheik, and the Russian are all customs, again, I'm classifying them as originals for the sake of my collection among the loose figures. So, technically, I could call them originals. So, 3 more originals. These 3 originals join originals Abdullah the Butcher, Carlos Colon, and Buddy Rose. And the customs include the No Shirt Ultimate Warrior, Kamala, Honky Tonk Man, and the Iron Sheik. So, we are down to the last 10 figures of this tournament. Round 4, we're going to have 5 winners, and in round 5, we're going to have our semifinals as we get down to the last 5 members. And I'm not going to include any other wrestlers in this tournament. What I'm going to do is pick the first 2 names, have them square off. That one is going to move to the finals. And the last 3 standing, I want to do a 3-man matchup. But instead of choosing 1 winner, I'm going to choose 2 winners. So my finals will consist of 3 guys. And maybe at that point I'll have a better idea of at least 1 guy to kick off right off the bat. But for now, I think I enjoy having 3-man finals better than 2-man finals. So, alright, that is the end of round 4. And just want to thank you guys so much for watching. In round 4, or round 3. And in round 4, I'm going to have, obviously, a different backdrop. So, I think this really makes it work better. Instead of switching up the backdrops every video, with this tournament, each round has its own backdrop, and that way you guys know when the round changes. So I think that helps a lot. I think I'm going to use the LJN backdrop as my next backdrop in round 4, and then round 5, I don't know. Probably move back to the other side of the room or something. Alright guys, thank you again for watching. Hopefully this was an enjoyable video for you. And I am excited to see who I'm going to choose. I have no idea. I mean, I love all the figures that are left over. Any one of them could be winners. But that's it for you now. Thanks again. Talk to you in the comments, and see you in the next video. Goodbye, everyone.